You hear about these incredible feats, right? Tech breakthroughs, amazing explorations. But sometimes it's the sheer audacity of a crime that really grabs you. Like the 2005 Banco Central burglary in Fortaleza, Brazil. $70 million.
Woof.
Gone.
Just like that.
Yeah, it's the scale that's just mind-blowing. 70 million US. Back in 2005, that was a huge, huge amount of money. And the way they pulled it off, well, it's almost legendary, isn't it?
Totally. And the front for the whole operation, it's almost funny. Picture this busy street, right? And there's this little shop, Grama Synthetica, synthetic grass. For 3 months, this totally boring-looking place was ground zero for one of the biggest heists ever.
It's that contrast, isn't it? The everyday facade hiding this massive secret project.
Yeah.
Makes you think, how did nobody notice?
Exactly. And this wasn't, a quick job. 3 months, they dug out over 70 metric tons of dirt and rock.
70 tons.
Can you imagine? And people walking by probably just thought, wow, they're really into fake grass. The fact the neighbors didn't suspect a thing just shows how good the cover was. We tend to overlook things if they seem normal on the surface,
So for this deep dive, we're not just going to marvel at the nerve of it all. We're going to actually dig into the details of it. Yeah, pun intended.
Right.
How they did it. But maybe more importantly, are there some surprising lessons here for us, especially thinking about, say, capital and funding now in 2025?
Exactly. It's about pulling apart this crazy story and finding those little nuggets, those insights that might actually apply to completely different things.
We'll look at their methods, maybe question some of their choices, because we'll get to that and see if there's these weird parallels to finance today.
Okay, let's get into it. The absolute core of the whole thing was the tunnel.
Yeah, the tunnel. And this wasn't just some rough digging. This was serious underground engineering, all secret.
Absolutely. We're talking nearly 80 meters long.
Which is almost a full football pitch.
Pretty much, yeah. Imagine digging that underground without anyone knowing. The sheer effort involved.
And doing it basically on your stomach. The tunnel was only about 70 centimeters high, like 2.3 feet.
Awful conditions.
Brutal. Just think about working like that for months.
The physical strain, the discomfort, being in that tight space, hauling out dirt day after day, it shows incredible determination. Misguided, obviously, but still.
And it wasn't just a rough hole either. They propped it up, right?
Yeah.
Wood beams, plastic sheeting so it wouldn't collapse.
Right. And they ran electricity down there. Lights, ventilation.
Didn't they even have some kind of basic aircon?
Yeah, rudimentary air conditioning. It shows how much thought went into it. This wasn't improvised.
Which leads to the cost. They estimated it cost around $500,000 just to build the tunnel.
Which was about $200,000 US back then.
That's serious seed money. You have to wonder where they got that from.
That initial investment is key, isn't it? Even for criminals, you need that startup capital and belief you'll get a return.
And the target, the main vault, Banco Central in Fortaleza. So over that weekend, August 6th and 7th, 2005, while everyone else is off, this crew is making their move.
The timing was smart. Weekends mean fewer people, less activity around the bank, gives them a longer window.
And they didn't just find a loose brick. They had to get through the vault floor, a meter thick, steel-reinforced concrete.
Wow.
Think about that. Digging all that way, then having to break through that.
The technical skill needed just for that final breach, it's significant. Special tools, knowing about structures. Again, it points to serious planning.
And somehow they got past the motion sensors, the alarms.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly how, but it wasn't luck.
No, that suggests either they had inside help or someone on the team was incredibly skilled with security systems of that era. It wasn't just brute force.
Definitely some brains involved there.
Yeah.
And what they took, stacks and stacks of used 50 real notes.
Used and, crucially, non-sequential.
Right, that wasn't an accident, was it?
Not at all. By taking bills that couldn't be easily tracked by serial number, they made it way harder for the police to follow the money trail. It was about keeping it, not just grabbing it.
Smart. So the final haul, estimated 164.7 million Brazilian reais, which, like we said, was that massive $70 million U.S. figure in 2005.
Just incredible.
The Monday morning rolls around, they're gone, vanished.
Yeah.
Huge investigation, international manhunt.
And they recovered barely anything in the end. What was it, about $8 or $9 million?
Yeah, a tiny fraction, which says a lot about their escape plan, too.
Absolutely. Their exit strategy was clearly as well thought out as the entry.
You know, every time I read about this, I'm just amazed by the the cleverness, the
Yeah.
discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hit this point, like one of our sources called it, the dumb part, the head scratcher.
Ah, yes. This is where you start thinking, what if?
Exactly. I mean, look at the skills they showed.
Yep.
Ingenuity, check. Planning, meticulous discipline, clearly. Logistics, brilliant. Getting funding, they did it somehow. Technical skills, undeniable.
If you list out their capabilities, it reads like a description for a successful startup team, doesn't it?
It really does. And that's the question, right? What if? What if they put all that brain power, all that hard work into something, legal?
They obviously weren't afraid of difficult long-term projects.
Not at all. So why this? Why the huge risk, the crime?
It makes you wonder about motivation, opportunity. Maybe perceived lack of opportunity, we don't know, but it's fascinating to think about.
Which, surprisingly maybe, brings us to raising capital. Now, in 2025, stick with me on this one.
Okay, I'm curious how you connect this heist to modern finance.
Well, think about how one source described trying to get a traditional loan. They called it like digging a tunnel.
I can see that.
And it clicks, right? I hear this all the time from business owners. Months, sometimes years spent trying to get funding from banks.
The process can be incredibly drawn out, lots of hoops to jump through.
Endless forms, piles of paperwork, banks asking for documents that seem totally random. Then you wait ages, maybe get a vague no, or you're stuck in review forever. It feels endless.
And that delay, that uncertainty, it drains so much time and energy you could be putting into your actual business.
Right, all that effort basically digging through red tape. And often you end up with nothing. Or maybe you get the money, but it's way too late.
It's that feeling of being stuck in this long, hard process with no guarantee at the end. A bit like those guys in their cramped tunnel, maybe.
Exactly. But what if there's another way? What if you need capital and you could get it without all that digging?
Okay.
Well, if you or your business holds publicly traded stocks or securities, there often is another way. It's called securities-backed lending.
Right. Using existing assets as leverage. A potentially much more direct path.
Yeah, instead of that bank bureaucracy tunnel, you use assets you already own. Stocks, bonds, traded on the market. You don't sell them.
No.
The lender gives you capital based on the value of that portfolio. It acts as collateral.
So the main difference is you're securing the loan with those liquid assets, rather than just your credit score or years of profit and loss statements. Generally, liquid stocks and bonds traded publicly work. You do need to consider market changes affecting your collateral's value, but that's part of the discussion with the lender.
And the speed can be totally different. We're often talking weeks to get funded, not 6 months, 9 months, or longer like traditional routes can sometimes take.
That speed can be crucial.
Plus, it's usually simpler. Forget digging up years of tax returns for the loan application itself. Often that's just not needed.
The focus shifts, really. It's less about your personal credit history for the loan itself, and more about the quality and value of the securities you're pledging.
And importantly, you're dealing with properly capitalized lenders. They're not brokers trying to get you to sell your stock. The portfolio stays yours.
Right.
You get the capital, you pay back the loan, you get your securities back unencumbered. It's kind of like borrowing against your house, but using your stocks instead.
That security is key. You unlock liquidity without having to sell off your investments.
Yeah, and there was this example in our source material, a shipping company, right? During all the COVID chaos, they used this kind of lending to get vital funds. It didn't just help them survive, they actually managed to expand.
That's a great example of how it can provide timely capital when other options might be too slow or just unavailable.
So let's kind of pull this all together. We've looked at this wild story, the Banco Central heist. Amazing effort, huge resources poured in by the thieves.
Right, and then that ironic question, what if they'd use those talents differently?
And we connected that to the frustrations many people feel trying to get money the old-fashioned way, through banks, that tunnel digging. And then we've talked about securities-based lending, a possible alternative, faster, simpler maybe if you hold those kinds of listed assets.
It represents a different route, potentially skipping a lot of the traditional delays and hurdles.
So the main takeaway here really is you don't need to plan a crazy heist to get capital from your assets.
Definitely not recommended.
No. And you probably don't need to spend months battling outdated bank processes either.
Which leads to maybe the final question for listeners to think about. If you hold publicly listed securities and you need capital maybe for your business, a project, just for liquidity, is there a more direct way you haven't really looked into yet?
Yeah, And if that idea of a faster, maybe simpler way to get capital sounds interesting, well, we'd suggest booking a strategy call. No obligation, just a chat. But those slots do tend to go quickly.
And just to mention, the source material we looked at also covers some FAQs, like the exact amount stolen back then, a clear definition of securities-based loans, and how risk is assessed. So there's more detail available if you want to dig deeper yourself.
So as we wrap up, just think about it. A crazy bank robbery from almost 20 years ago can actually give us a weirdly useful perspective on navigating financial challenges today. Consider the ingenuity, the sheer effort involved in that heist, and then think about how those same principles, effort, planning, ingenuity applied the right way, the legal way, might open up doors for you.